Yep.
Framework. Theories of epistemology come first. One foundation, proper forms of knowledge production, or side contribution to any conclusion. These must have a reliable, normally legitimate approach to arriving at that conclusion. Two, proximity. The practice of debate is the practice of generating epistemic procedures of research and dialogue. We may not be able to create universal ethics. We can ensure we all follow the best epistemic practice theories necessary for education. Control the internal link to all the other worlds developed. Already two. Educational studies are pursued within an academic institutional context raises issues concerning theory and practice. How can education best be related to practical concerns? How we deal with future education when institutions are desirable. Such questions are always interconnected. Emphasize the importance of epistemology for resolving issues in education. Epistemology is relevant when we raise the question of how to justify a particular concept of education. An intellectual virtue paradigm is intrinsically valuable and epistemically necessary. Can align motivation with implementation and explain habituation over biological superiority and ensure the acquisition of practical necessary facts and contribute to the general flourishing. Picture 22. Intellectual virtues such as being curious, humble, tenacious, conscientious, one cannot have while also being morally vital. All virtues incorporate motivational desire for the truth. Intellectual curious involves behaving in characteristic ways and stealing conditions. Someone who feels exhibit these behavior and they have the right motivations to do like the intellectual virtues. Cognitive skills can be manifested in ways that do not that need not involve love of the truth. Another property that distinguishes virtues from cognitive skills of the former that never are innate but must be required through training. Without training, they will be lost. Intellectual virtues play a managerial role in one's cognitive architecture. Virtues enable one to make decisions about what we know, what we inquire about, what cognitive purposes of one information, how to best assess the information, something else lacking. Might know a great deal, but she would be at a disadvantage when it comes to making use of the knowledge and will find desirable knowledge hard to gain. There are essential components of flourishing. This kind of value is final rather than instrumental. One should value intellectual virtue for their own sake. The constitutional goal of epistemology is inquiry to truth. Only epistemic virtue paradigm can capture the true nature of what it means to be normative epistemic agent. Picture 22. Our focus on the drive to inquire justification is required. Knowing the answer to a question may not properly state one's drive. One knows the answer. One does not understand the difference. Has practical consequences. One can communicate this answer to someone. One ought to keep inquiring until one gains understanding. The thought is not that one should always prefer understanding to mere knowing. That intellectually virtuous doesn't inquire about everything, but exercise judgment about topics to pursue and how far. Intellectually tenacious does not mean that she will persist in her inquiries when progress is hopeless. Appealing to them intellectually virtuous enables us to capture the kinds of claims that we want to make about good inquiry. Thus, the standard is consistent with fostering the intellectually virtuous inquiry. Only this resolves all criticism of epistemic value. Monism instills individuals innate moral qualities that extend beyond epistemology. Picture 22. Rather than trying to determine truth as a fundamental good in the abstract, we should get a specifically virtue theoretic conception of epistemic value. Truth, the monism of going to inquire for significant truth over trivial, motivated desire for truth to understand the world in fundamental respects and maximize true beliefs regardless of the content. One can develop an aspect without developing character as a whole. The desire for the truth can be embedded with other fundamental values of the non-intellectual nature. Prefer additionally one or take theories of preferable consequentialist epistemology. The collapse asking the question why all action will be infinitely regressive. Absent or take the description of values of a person that could justify the rules intrinsic to goodness be internally ensuring that we strive to become a better person, maximize the probability we control the correct ethical rules. Linguistics, our take provides an infinitely richer vocabulary for evaluating actions that extend beyond goodness and badness. Group 11. Goodness and badness comes in degrees. The archaic vocabulary allows finer distinction praiseworthy can be conveyed ought to be done yet expressing admirable deontic vocabulary seems impossible. All like being said in deontic terms can be in archaic terms of attractive ethical theories. Much lower levels of systematic trust, cut the card at trust.
Okay.
Give me 1 sec.
Okay. Alright, are you good?
I'm good.
Okay. My first question is the standard. What does it mean to be an inquirer?
An inquirer means that you want to learn more things, so you take an approach to the world about how, like, you want to, like, research more things, you want to learn about, like, how the world works, and ways to approach, like, issues.
Okay, great. So we just learn more things. I guess, what does it mean to be virtuous?
Virtuous?
Yeah.
It means to be virtuous by you have to foster, like, certain character traits that make you want to, like, learn more things, right? To be an intellectually curious
So why do we want to, like, learn more about the world?
Well, that's the only way that we can solve problems. For example, it's like the practices or like processes that we go into thinking about things like, for example, racism, sexism, settler colonialism, all those issues, and the processes that we go into like learning about those.
Okay. So the affirmative has presented idea like it is important to learn about the world. How has like the affirmative presented a specific analysis of the world? Like how is the affirmative engaged in that? Like you just say it is important for like.
Well, we don't have like a universal
we
don't have a universal way of viewing the world. The app is specifically about the research practices that we take into evaluating issues like setcol, things like sexism, racism, etc.
Okay, research practices. So
yes.
like I guess what is the affirmative's like research practice, or what like just like what does the affirmative think is good about its research practice?
Well, the good things about we don't have to say specifically what things are good about the research practices, but we also get good character traits, right?
So you're making an argument that the app is reliant on good research traits, but you have not established what a good research trait is.
Well, we don't have to establish what is a good character trait or not, because we're arguing that things like, for example, like being intellectually curious is a good thing. You can
curious about like what? Like is it good for me to like, I don't know, be curious about like someone like spy on them? Like is that like, that seems like kind of a bad way to be curious.
I don't think that's like something that we'd be like curious about. Well, we would say
like some
that,
people definitely
we would
are
say
like
that
in
the process
serial killers exist.
No, in the process of like actually gaining knowledge, we wouldn't say that we're gonna go out and like do things like that. We're saying that it inculcates good character traits. For example, like being a virtuous person, being humble, tenacious. There's like examples in the card.
Okay, wait. So like, there's like examples of what virtues are, being humble and things like what?
Yeah, you can argue. You can if you want to defend things like dogmatism are good, then you can.
No, I'm not. I'm just asking you like what, like how do we know what is good, what is virtuous, what are the specific virtues under the world we have?
Well, we say the traits that make us better at achieving our goal, which is reaching more like intellectual.
Wait, the trait. So achieving our goal. What if my goal is like I'm a serial killer and I'm like interested in like spying on people? Like that's my goal. Is that virtuous?
That wouldn't make sense, because the practice of becoming an intellectually virtuous inquirer means that number one, you foster good character traits that make you not want to do that, but two, it also fosters
good character traits.
Yes. You can argue that dogmatism is good. We presented reasons why things like being tenacious, being humble, etc., and being intellectually curious is good.
Awesome. All right. I'll take a little bit of running threat. Okay, that's 1 minute. The order is just going to be 2 off case.
This case just swapped out.
Yeah, so it's going to be framing and just the offense. There's like a little blip at the end, like kind of. I'll tell you where to float when I get there.
Okay, can you?
I'm setting. I'm good. Okay, it's in there. Okay. You guys as well. Insert. There you go. Great. The one-axis model debate is structured by settler colonials absent a firm engagement with their oppressed desire. Every move settlers take an interest in produce on indigenous land is overthrown by a genocidal desire to absolve guilt and race indigeneity. The role of the values of the best methodology is actively resist product of settler colonials, and that's Corey Scott Mark 15. For us as settlers, the engagement with our indigenous ways of knowing how unsettled our identity, that we create ourselves in ethical ways. We remember that settlers are subject to relational ontology founded upon a hyper-conscious, unconscious, there's an elite orientation and a longing for the return to the world we were before that we earlier are composed of relationship and infinitely proliferating series of catastrophes that settlement in the conscious space of oppression that from settlers signified which we must not be, which cannot be spoken because it has to do with the settler constituted desire trapped and lack of an imaginalist malicious in the nation settler are bound by the effective investments in the other the present realization of this lack comes to manifest itself as a painful enjoyment of substitute to that unconscious reduces settlers as a standard for the subject to be overwhelmed with guilt. Settlers must believe that they're all harmless incredibly and no contemporary actuality of extreme which individuals built from less politics spirituality can be simply delighted into within European models and forgot settlers the origin point that are irritating practice after accounts of policy sanitizes incorporeal conduct bodies and the length of cultural termination of the disease and responsible for the death of 90% of the population. The denial through the depression only. Wait, I forgot. I didn't start my timer. Okay, 6 minutes. Thank you. Denial through repression can only be sent through ongoing the integrity of self-production, which press with serve in ways that work the capacities and ways where politics are agreement that settler capitalism premise on the alien mechanism that reward workers with the resources and land produce all through dispossession, which I don't think is virtuous, and that's Cape 19. All the work of the non-indigenous people who inform is free purpose on dispossession of the land of which all work capital resources continue to press on indigenous people who contribute to the accountable profitability and for privilege of labor of northern indigenous people through which moves through both inside and outside capital relation points to the importance of theorizing the shifting relation between social reproduction and capitalist direction that low condensed hard penalty on cash economy predicated on alienation of the homelands and water submission that is not going to be different ways to feed our families. The psychological landscape that contemporary capitalism defined by the computation of the mind has created reality in which people are unable to recognize the value as human beings and or the critique of the well-making of missing of investigation and liberation due to the domestic form of oppression is going to be found within the world organized by settler capitalism. And the alternative is a refusal. This is a degenerate practice towards the decolonial future to the Western crushed away from the Ashdown Slaughter in King 17. A gender refusal of the decolonial abolition tradition, making Western culture one itself settler colonial making settler colonial the object research and the assumptions and inclusive model because the meta refusal reversing the declaration acted by European theory which used the genocide and annihilate native people watching the use of the practice genocide itself ceases to exist and the native people can exist. Human United States can no longer determine the condition of being human. That studies for black native resistance and practical theory that to the terms of identity and our interpretation of debated that judged by the acted as audit research based on its ability to influence objectivity and capacity to support a model of resistance settler colonialism. Winning a link is the reason that framing justifies that violent action should be rejected. The permutation must include the out the entire epithany and anything else is severance. And the second up, counterplan text in the United States ought to ensure teachers in the United States receive living wage and exceed the rate of inflation. Solves every single piece of 1AC offense. They only make arguments about teachers, which means that even if that's some part of their offense, that should resolve it because it resolves the majority of the link on the critique and still accesses all of their offense. Now the case page proper, starting on the framing and section there, so it doesn't require them to win every single part of the framework. That means indicting any single piece of it, the standard epistemology first, etc. It would sort of collapse any part of the offense or reasons as to why it's justified. Now we'll do the lemon line work here. First is that you should reject arguments that auto-affirm like index schools, wherever they might be in the absence of and you just by you voting on the arguments like that, just by thinking of conclusions like anything was true, which is obviously repugnant and also makes it impossible to debate, which is terrible for class. Second of all is that ontology overdetermines what kinds of epistemology or epistemological experience we can actually access because it determines the conditions for being or living within the world, which interacts how we interact with one another, which determines our experiences and thus our knowledge with the world. Two, or third, Tory directly indicts this idea about education. We are in subject to reproduction. Our subject to reproduction is sort of rooted in settler colonialism, and only we create a specific model to rupture the ways in which that subjectivity is iteratively produced and ingrained within a system of violence. And fourth is that there's no interpretation of who is virtuous or capable of virtue. It is always split along racialized lines. I.e., native people are deemed as uncivilized, unvirtuous, which is compared to the virtuous model that was explicitly created within European, sort of a model of classical European enlightenment, which was inherently sort of violent and is going to sort of inevitably produce a form of dispossession. But fifth also indicates that the 1AC has no sort of has no interpretation of what is virtuous. Means that any sort of action we justify cross-text was clear. They have no interpretation of why it is sort of not bad to spy on someone else if I'm curious about them, or why a serial killer cannot kill someone else because they are curious about like their anatomy or something like that. Which is and there's sort of only sort of argument. They actually cross-text had no answer to why that's bad. So the next argument is that on the standard, inquiring as a settler is a inherently violent thing. It seeks in the context of repression. It seeks to sort of become native. Is a form of the settler seeking to become native. Things like the Pocahontas rule, in which settlers use blood quantum to act as though they are native to ingrain themselves in tribal tribal culture to say that they are to foreground themselves as the origin point of history, to as a way of absolving themselves of guilt and shame by saying that they themselves are the native population is a form of curiosity that is inherently parasitic and violent. The affirmative would cause a form of inquiry like that settlers do things like assimilate into native culture, which is obviously exceptionally violent because they are curious about it. There are certain boundaries that should not be considered, especially when they are inherently violent, given the current structuring of the world that the affirmative is unable to grapple with, given the fact that the 1AC has no explicit theorization of anything materials or independent reason as to why the affirmative is incapable of generating specific political demands, because they, again, cannot recognize specific structures, because they cannot call out specific institutions of the state, specific institutions of the happening. Again, every single example I just gave is proof of that. The next argument is that, the next argument, I don't know if it's 6 or 7, but it also means the critique turns the case because it means that native violence is also sort of non-virtuous. Obviously, it is inherently violent. It is definitely not respectful of the other people, which means that any sort of link to the affirmative is also turned to their offense. And then the 7th argument, the 7th point on the first argument, we don't need normative ethics to plan revolutionary action or to justify it. We already take certain impacts like racism as inherently bad and then work backwards from them to justify if our ethical theories are from a good starting point, which means that it is violent or not necessary to question why things like settler colonialism being bad in the first place is true. But 7 also. Then the lived experience is that it didn't start derived from unique characteristics like culture, religion, place, and time. They already exist, saying that the critique makes it impossible to theorize that or essentializes them and produces one universal truth reliant upon oration and supremacy that is historically colonial. 8. Decolonization is not a metaphor. The retreat into the politics of betternization moves in instance that abstraction of material realities. 20. No intellectual moves to capture some material work. Decolonization challenges to ask for ourselves so we can calculate the mechanism of change. Decolonization is not a metaphor. Colonialism a material set of political relationships as we struggle to rest colonialism can be understood by analysis, but engaging the ground of the people come together. Intellectual movements come by the works of the distant realities that solve sort of colonialism through theoretical categorizations, connected to the enlightenment, belief that individual action like religious or material bondage, any sort of political relations to naturalize and taken as a basis for action. Independently, the offense page, turn it. 1, they reduce unemployment and hiring. That's young 19 of sort of hires viewer the cost was more productive than the new hire. The owners might make sure on the duties, but in addition to their own, but this is a de facto pay that works in a pay job. In hours, young 19 workers will see that their wage or job set by having their hours cut. Workers will not actually see an increase in their paychecks. Few hours add up to a lot of money. Independently. All their arguments about education are in the context of teachers in the world of fiat, not related to this actual classroom. Independently, disclosure. They didn't disclose the app when asked multiple times, which is shifty means we had no pure on facts, used the from their favorite sequences, everything because we couldn't engage in the app at all. Turns something claims because negating off requires equal access to value, which also means we couldn't actually inquire with the affirmative, which turns the 1AC offense independently because it means that we didn't have a better form of education. I was curious. I'll also just pull up a timer.
Yeah. Everyone's good for cross?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh wait, I can't use the timer because
So because colonialism is happening, the judges in this room should be underpaid for every round that they judge.
What? No. That's what?
Well, that's what the app says.
Our argument,
a
couple things is first, we have criticized the entire basis of wage politics. We have criticized, which would also implicate debate as an activity in the first place. Second of all, is that you make no arguments about the way these are not hourly wages, so I don't think that is implicated by the affirmative.
That's fine. Wait, okay, so what's the link? Where is it in the 1AC that you say that giving teachers money is a bad idea?
The Canfield 19 evidence indicates that a reinvestment into a form of labor politics is reliant on sort of redistribution of stolen land. It sort of is predicated on an investment within a system to make it more stable,
okay, so
which is inherently colonial because it sustains the colony.
What? So how does the counterplan resolve the links? You read a counterplan that says that teachers
should
get a living wage. How does that resolve the links?
I think our argument is that the counterplan probably does not resolve all the links. That is obvious. It is that it resolves a majority of the links because obviously.
What majority of the links
everything except for teachers. The teachers are a very small form of wage.
Oh, but they're a small form of wage? What?
They are a small sector of employees.
How many links do you have?
The counterplan solves all the affirmative and it links significantly smaller into the critique.
How many links do you have?
3.
Can you explain? Give me one sentence explanation of each of them.
Sure. So the one on the critique that I just explained. The one on the case page that is about how ontology overdetermines epistemology, and the next one was about how inquiring into sort of native practices, native cultures is inherently violent, and how the affirmative reproduces that.
Okay, that's fine. For the alt, can you draw me a Venn diagram of the alt and the app and what differences are between them?
A Venn diagram. It's
Yeah.
like why a Venn diagram?
To show the differences?
I can just tell you the differences.
Okay,
That would
you
be easier. So the alternative is a refusal of the federal government, and the affirmative that would necessitate the destruction of the United States. Second of all is it would not involve investment into labor politics. Labor politics would be destroyed under the rules of the affirmative because it would not rely on a sort of static conception of monetary value and resources that Canfield criticizes.
Okay, yeah,
Third
that's
is that it is not
What is
reliant on the
colonial-
epistemological starting point of the 186 framework.
Yeah, that's fine. What is a cellular epistemology?
Like everything I said about your framework, reasons as to why it is
Can you
violence.
give me a sentence explanation of what it is?
Sure. So an example of that was the Circuche and McCune evidence, or Circuche evidence that talks about decolonization not being a metaphor. The aesthetic interpolation of how the 1AC is not material enough is an argument that sort of settler philosophy, settler epistemology constantly abstracts away from the material.
So what does it look
We would
like?
criticize that. It looks like you're at.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm confused what that means.
Okay, yeah, that's fine for cross. I'm gonna start running typing.
Oh, thank you.
that was 427. The order is gonna be the out. It's gonna be the app, then the counter plan, the K, and at the bottom I'll do like the new apps thing.
Okay, I'm good.
Just see for the app framework, then this intention, counterplan critique.
And then critique it.
Right, I'm good.
Everyone's good.
Yes.
Except the case where these are the end goal of all epistemic projects to find a truth of some sort that requires a character creation and do so that we do so in an ethical manner, prioritizing education, procedural virtues, and prioritizing the development of those character traits which always any particular virtue we foster on the offense. We say that paying teachers a living wage is good to foster education because that means that we actually value their work, which means that we hire better teachers because they are paid more. One of the main reasons why we
The order is. Oh, sorry.
I was about to say.
Okay, that's fine. The order is the K, the counterclaim, and case.
Case, framework of contention, or?
Framework and contention.
I'm good.
Yeah. The order on the K is going to be a little overview, and then.
Do you want to do the paper for the overview or no?
My phone might die again. I know. I don't know how to copy this one. Thank you. Okay. Is everybody good? Yep. The political ontology of the settler colony is shaped by libidinal investments into a product of nationalism, which the settler constantly yearning to place itself at the center of history to swerve from any guilt for the violence that daily life is predicated on. This desire manifests itself due to active erasure of indigenous peoples and histories in the present, and a refusal to acknowledge their altered ethical and geographic circumstances. This is the only coherent explanation for things like Pocahontas exceptions, where native people where settlers attempt to act as though they are natives, hoarding fuels to kill the Indian and save the man, missing indigenous women, and constant pollution of native land. The only way to reconcile this repression is to forefront indigenous narratives instead of hiding shame, which frames the links debate. Their use of epistemology is not able to reconcile with this ontology, which we'll do on this line proper. The first argument that they make is one, they drop, we don't need to explain why impacts are bad, but because we already know settler colonialism is violent, things like racism are bad, and then we work backwards to understand if our ethical theories are reliable based on their ability to explain those things. It is not productive to do things like go to a Trump rally and explain to them why racism is bad, because that is obviously not going to lead to any political organization, and is probably futile. Two, ontology means that the logical, or that the idea about, that they say biological circumstances are irrelevant, but no, they conceded ontology overdetermines experiences because it influences the way that we interact with others, our perceptions of native people, our perceptions of the land, perceptions of governance, which means that resolving the ontological structure of the state through decolonization is a prior question to any sort of conception of the affirmative. Third is that the role of the ballot is a question of specificity. They say learning is good, but the question of what kinds of learning should we do, and our argument that we should forefront sort of analysis of settler subjectivity within that learning, and we're proving that the affirmative has not done that. The epistemic Monty argument makes no sense because we have indicted their framework, the starting point of it, and indicted their offense, which means that every single part of the 1AC is inherently violent. Each part relies on its other because it is a syllogism. That's how the affirmative works. The fifth argument about settlers being ignorant of native cultures, they conceded examples of native federation, which means that sort of native, just because settlers were ignorant does not mean that them going through a process of exploration is productive, especially when they attempt to do things like assimilate within native cultures, actually producing a form of erasure by acting as though they are native, which is inherently violent, as per the Gloria Scott Meyer argument. This was a dropped example coming out of the 1 and C. The sixth argument about the app controlling the internal link to education. The app cannot explain good characteristic traits. That was clear coming out of Prosex. They cannot explain why it is bad for example, a serial killer to not stalk someone because they are curious about where they live or who they are, which means that just because they are curious is not enough alone to a virtue to justify their action. The affirmative cannot reconcile with that, which means that the affirmative's blank status of just education being important is not sufficient in this debate. The sixth argument is that even if they conceded there are plenty of examples of native epistemologies and ethics that can push and sort of determine normative structures independently of the affirmative, which means that the affirmative's idea that we are reliant on the affirmative, the decolonization is reliant on the affirmative, is inherently paternalistic. The next argument about the conceding authority, one, questions the specificity of our arguments about why they're sort of about which have been the syllogism above. But second of all, is that it's a question of subjectivity production within this round, not fiat. Fiat is illusory. The 1AC doesn't actually change the material conditions of teachers. All they have done is been a theorization about the world, and we have criticized that theorization, which means that they are definitely not looking into this. The Campfield evidence, we'll extend the topic link here, which they didn't actually grapple with. All they did was it's not about teachers, but they dropped the fundamental argument. The asked concept of wealth redistribution through a more equitable wage is only possible with resources and wealth that were stolen through dispossession and natives. This sustains the settler colonialism by reinvesting in a politics of wage labor in which we are reliant on stolen labor, stolen wealth in order to engage in these wages. They're sort of the sort of Tuck and Yang argument. We didn't read Tuck and Yang. You should flow. The 10 argument on the alternative. We'll explain the alternative now. They only explain why the app, the alt, they didn't make arguments in the alt. The alt is refusal of the affirmative, a degenerative practice in which we invest in native and black theorization outside of the state. That looks like things like direct native resistance, taking over Alcatraz Island, direct things like destruction of Keystone Pipeline, things or like protesting Keystone Pipeline, direct material action that is capable of resisting the state, in forefronting native literature within places where the academia is inherently good. Every link to the side of the alternative, they made no answer to the alt. It solves much better than the affirmative. The counterclaim. It's condo, not going for it. They didn't make any arguments as to why these links implicate the critique. Even if they did, the app links way harder because you criticized your entire epistemology, which means that link definitely outweighs the age. One, we've implicated that intellectual curiosity is not good for the affirmative. It is not good because they already extended the ontology work, which should implicate every single attention on case. But two is that they have no conception of how the affirmative is capable of resolving settler colonialism. And they say the app is key to rewrite history books. What does that mean, given that the affirmative has no material theorization of what it means of settler colonialism? They have definitely not presented that in this round. But second of all, we have declaimed how that could be exceptionally problematic, given the fact that that settler people attempt to incorporate themselves within native communities, which turns that argument. But third is that the incarnation of virtue argument about people being curious causes good traits was turned by the serial killer example, but independently, they conceded that the link to the app turn the offense because it means that it is, they conceded that state action and the fact that we are reliant on the state turns the affirmative because obviously dispossession of native peoples is something that is inherently non-virtuistic, which means that the only way to resolve that is through decolonization, which only the alt can do, which is the question of investing in the state, which is independently, and it turned to the offense. They dropped the affirmative cause unemployment, lowers wages, because while wages increase, that means that schools are no longer able to employ many teachers because they don't have money, which means that even if everything else in the debate, I lose. I still win this drop turn, the 1 year is lost because they did not talk about unemployment in the 1 year. Even if they apply this is not about teachers of some sort, it applies to every other worker in the sector, which outweighs like 99%, and which means that it causes massive poverty. Shut up. Causes massive poverty for every other kind of worker, which outweighs the affirmative because it destroys that virtue, but it definitely applies to teachers as well because they did no statistic analysis. They are just behind technically, they have dropped the critique, dropped ontology frames their entire conception of ethics, even if we lose the critique. Case turn. No perms, plenty of links, state link was dropped, links to the framework. Even if serial killers is probably bad, you shouldn't vote for an ethic that justifies that.
Okay, let's do the rest.
So just the case and then the critique, right? Case and critique. Okay.
how to be